Well, hello, welcome to HEAR 120, Anatomy, Physiology, Unit 6, I believe it is. Anyway, I believe it's, what do you call it, cochlear physiology, and I believe it's week 3 on cochlear physiology. We are the first week after midterms. It is now March 20th, first day of spring, I'm told. Anyway, long winter. Glad it's over, or getting overing anyhow. So we have covered, I think we spent 2 weeks on cochlear physiology prior to the midterm, and you just have had spring break, so this is the first week after spring break. And what we will try and tackle is more of the cochlear physiology, and maybe, just maybe, we can get to the tail end of that today. So I'm just looking at it. Last week, yeah, that's what it was. Unit 5. We're on Unit 5. And we looked at the horizontal vertical movement of cochlear fluids. Then we covered the asymmetrical traveling wave and the upward spread of masking. And then we looked at the twofold role of the outer hair cells, and we stopped just above otoacoustic emissions in your notes. So, why don't I share screen and we'll go to those places and see where we are. All right, pull up the notes. There we are, inner ear physiology. I'll make it just a tad larger. Okay, and where did we say we'd gone up? Well, let's look at it here. We have horizontal and vertical motions. We listed those right here. I will review, promise, always do. Then we looked at traveling waves versus sound waves. We should make sure we know the differences there. Asymmetrical traveling wave and the upward spread of masking. And that's how you can see, where is that? Here, the upward spread of masking. Okay, that portion is important. I told you a couple of weeks ago not to worry about these things here. Depolarization and hyperpolarization, couldn't care less. We looked at traveling wave and the twofold role of outer hair cells. And moving on down, we got to just right here. Okay, so there we have it. And then we have cochlear disorders. Now, that's the part we did not cover. And we won't spend detailed time in this today, and I'll tell you why. Because you're going to be learning about this in HEAR 125, hearing disorders, this summer. You have a course in hearing disorders. But we will take a cursory look at it. You've got the types of presbycusis, the main one. And then you have the second most common cause of hearing loss, noise-induced. Then you have Meniere's disease, and then you have genetic or hereditary cochlear pathology. And then I gave you a bit of a summary of traveling wave physiology, just a summary. So let's start right at the beginning and take a running leap, and then this will be all review, okay, until we get to otoacoustic emissions near the end of the thing here. Okay. Deep breath, sip of coffee here. All right, purpose of vestibular system, give the brain info regarding the position of your body in space. What is the balance system? Vision, vestibular system, proprioception. Remember that? All right, purpose of the inner ear or cochlea, to change mechanical energy into electrical energy so it can be understood by the brain. The middle ear changes sound waves into mechanical energy. The cochlea takes that mechanical piston-like energy from the middle ear, changes it into hydraulic energy, in other words, the traveling waves. And the hair cells change the traveling waves into electrical current. Okay, and changing means to transduce. Transduce means to change energy from one to another. I would make sure you put a star by inner hair cells being afferent, sending info to the brain, outer hair cells being efferent, they take info from the brain. And make sure we can all appreciate this paragraph and know what's wrong with it, okay? All sounds entering the cochlea, circle that. Sounds do not enter the cochlea, okay? Sounds activate a cochlea, creating a ripple wave, in other words, a traveling wave along the basilar membrane. I'm reading right here, okay, which goes from base to apex. The waves go way slower than sound does in air, taking a few milliseconds to complete a journey of a few millimeters over the sensory hair cells. Each individual traveling wave grows in intensity as it travels, eventually reaching a peak before coming to a complete stop at the unique place on the basilar membrane. Okay, each traveling wave gets larger until coming to a complete stop. High frequency ones stop here, low frequency ones take a further distance to stop. Von Beckersey, make sure you put a star by his name. He's the guy that won a Nobel Prize for modernizing traveling wave concepts. His views were held firmly and not questioned until the 1980s. Gold, in 1948, already suspected outer hair cell action, but von Beckersey did not accept Gold's theories. Remember I told you von Beckersey made a great big model in his laboratory at Harvard University, and he said it worked way better when he put the oval window of the foot plate of the stapes, and when he put that into the round window, he said things worked better in his model. He couldn't figure out why his model didn't really work very good with the stapes footplate into the oval window as it normally is. Gold said, well, maybe the outer hair cells are doing something that you're not accounting for. Von Beckersey poo-pooed him, told him to go away. Late 1980s, a guy named Kemp, who's still living today, linked outer hair cells to otoacoustic emissions, proving that Gold was right. Now, so you got three names there. Traveling wave, how does it work? Here's that horizontal and vertical motion stuff, and I'll just show you a picture because pictures speak a lot louder than words, and you can see the horizontal motion going back and forth here, and the horizontal motion going back and forth here, and here's the vertical motion. And how does, here's a side here, how does that happen? Unrolled cochlea, foot plate of the stapes on top, pushing in and out of the round oval window, pushing fluid around through the helicotrema and back out to bulge the round window. That back and forth movement is the horizontal movement, creating a vertical up and down movement seen here in a cross section. This square being this square here, turned sideways. Okay, and you can see the scala media now, which is drawn simply in black here on this line. This black here would be this triangular area. You can see Reissner's membrane bending, basilar membrane bending, and that causes the shearing action of the hair cells. The shearing action. I'm wondering if I can show it to you this way. Maybe, let's see if I can show it to you. Nah, I don't know. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. I'm not sure. I'm just going to play around for a second here. Causing the shearing action, the bending action. Let's see if I can. Let's see. This way, this way. It's better this way. Nah, I can't show it to you. You know what I mean. There's not one hinge, and I'll show it to you larger. The trick to understanding the shearing action taking place in the cochlea is not to think that everything just went like this. It's rather to think that things went like this. There's two hinges, and that the two hinges therefore cause a bending of the hairs, as we will see in just a little piece. Okay, back to sharing screen. So that whole horizontal energy business is, here's the cochlea rolled out again. Okay, This is a boring picture. This picture is showing you how the cochlea is tonotopic, so you've seen that. This picture is showing you how the cochlea is tonotopic again. You've seen that. This is a picture showing you the horizontal movement once again, changing into the up and down vertical movement. How does that happen? Because the helicotrema is a narrow space, and you're forcing a wide area of fluid to converge around a narrow place, thus building up pressure. And because you've built up the pressure, something has to give, and that giving action may take place here or here or here, depending on what the frequency of the sound was. Good. Once again, eardrum, malleus incus stapes, oval window, round window, horizontal action, vertical action. Vertical action, okay? Notice where the interplay. And the cause of the vertical action is due to the buildup of pressure caused by this narrow helicotrema, whereby something has to give, and the only thing that can give is going to be the membranous labyrinth, because these walls are membranes, and they're not solid bone. And that giving has got to take place either near the base, and if it does, you hear a high frequency sound. If it happens near the apex, you hear a low frequency sound. Here's that shearing action I was talking to you about. You have one hinge here and the other hinge here. So it's not just simply like a whole triangle going up and down like that, otherwise nothing happens between my hands. Okay, the trick to understanding that is knowing that you've got two hinges taking place. So this hinge, and when they both bend together, you've got a shearing or bending action of the hairs. Okay, as you can see. Also in this picture, which highlights the two hinges even more. This is a result of the vertical up and down motion taking place inside the cochlea. Here's a picture showing you two different traveling waves, and these are showing you regarding the asymmetrical shape of the traveling waves. Note how the envelope of the wave is shaped like a kite. Note how the front of the wave faces the apex. Note how the wave front is steeper than the wave tail. And the wave is going from left to right in this case. And in the top one, the wave stopped. It grew. As it grows, it got bigger, bigger, bigger until stopping at a unique place along the basilar membrane, much as Kemp had said when he was talking about the shearing, when he was talking about the growing. So here, each individual frequency component wave grows in intensity as it travels, eventually reaching a peak before coming to a complete stop at a unique place on the basilar membrane. Thus is shown here. This wave went from left and stopped here. This wave went from left and stopped here. Either way, the waves are asymmetrical. Same here. Asymmetrical waves. Very important for understanding what's called the upward spread of masking. Now we're showing the waves going from left to right. I should say from right to left. There you go. Look at the arrows. And here, a low frequency wave, a mid frequency wave, a high frequency wave. In all cases, the waves are asymmetrical. Same here. A base wave, a mid wave, and an apex wave. High frequency, mid frequency, low frequency. Model representation of basilar membrane movement in response to the word information. These are all traveling waves. It's these guys. It's these guys. It's these guys. You're looking at a whole bunch of those happening with the word information. In from the voice, loud, low frequency, waves near the apex, waves small near the base, informe, waves high frequency, unvoiced sounds. Remember acoustics, 110, high frequency consonants, soft. So all this is showing you is follow my cursor, the length of the basilar membrane from base to apex. And the reason why it's long is just showing you what's happening over time. And look at all those waves taking place with the word information. Unreal. Again, the upward spread of masking, showing you a low frequency orange wave, a high frequency light blue wave, showing you the traveling waves get sharpened by the outer hair cells. And this is what we talked about this morning earlier in 110. Frequency resolution, the ability to distinguish between frequencies close together. Difference Lyman for frequency, just noticeable difference. Delta F, for example. When the waves are sharpened by outer hair cells, now just this frequency is stimulated, or just this one. But when you lose the black dotted points, your waves are more rounded. And now you have less ability to distinguish between frequencies close together. This is why hearing aids and people mix like oil and water. It all has to do with the cochlea. So here's the upward spread of masking. So this is one reason, the loss of the sharpening of the traveling wave. And another reason why people have problems hearing in noise is this, upward spread of masking. The traveling waves are asymmetrical, as we said 2 weeks ago, and now as we're saying today. Okay, look, you have the rumbling of a truck outside, and you have the peeping of a canary in your kitchen. And the canary may be soft, beep, 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 beep. The rumbling of a truck, the tail of its wave will cover the high-frequency traveling wave caused by the canary. But it doesn't work the other way around. You can have the soft rumbling of a truck outside your house, and Miss Hairy Canary can peep, 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 all she wants. Her traveling waves are going to be made, the traveling waves made by her or him are going to be louder. Actually, it's male canaries that sing. Made by that male canary are going to be taller, but they're not going to go out this way. And that's why lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. Background noise is mostly low frequency. High frequency consonants are high frequencies. So think of background noise like a bull in a china shop. Upward spread of masking. Now, I don't know where all this is going here. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, yeah, you got some of that too. Yeah. Oh, yeah, all kinds of good stuff. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to cover this too much in here, but I will just say this. This slide and the next slide are kind of esoteric, but let's just look at them for the sake. Just check it out. Let's say, like a thief in the night, I came into your house, put you out under general anesthesia, and ripped out every low-frequency hair cell in your right ear cochlea. Okay, let's just say I did that. So you were theoretically deaf in the right ear below 1,000 hertz. And I left all your high-frequency hair cells alone. The next morning I do a hearing test on you, it's going to look like a mild to moderate hearing loss. And you know why? Because when I make a big traveling wave in your dead cochlear region, remember I pulled out all the low-frequency hair cells, the tail of the wave in black still stimulated healthy, higher frequency hair cells. You're going to raise your hand. Do-do-do-do. You are hearing the low frequencies on the left with these hair cells. It's because of the asymmetrical shape of the traveling wave. Look at high frequency dead areas. Let's say I went into your other ear the next night and I pulled out every hair cell above 1,000 hertz or above 500 hertz, let's say. Just killed off every hair cell above. Then the next morning I give you a hearing test. Your hearing loss is going to look like this. It's going to go down. It means that if I went further and further into your dead area and stimulated, I'd have to make the traveling wave really big for the front of the wave to still stimulate healthy, lower frequency hair cells. So basically, the shape of the hearing loss that you get, even after total high frequency death, okay, or the shape of the of the hearing loss that you get after total low frequency death of hair cells, it's going to look different. And this is an audiogram indicating the intensity of the sound needed for the right ear to respond. but it's a bit esoteric. I'm going to talk more about this in 125, hearing disorders. Anyway, back to the shearing action, okay? Once again, because of the vertical motion of the scala media, okay, you're getting a bending action taking place which shears or bends the hairs. Shears or bends the hairs. So think of the cochlea as two transductions. One is it's taken mechanical energy from the middle ear, the foot plate of the stapes, pushing in and out of the oval window, and it's changing that into traveling waves. And then now the hair cells are taking the traveling waves and they're changing that energy into electrical energy. And that's done when the hairs are sheared. Now the outer hair cells are efferent, the inner hair cells are afferent, and I even say even the medical profession is beginning to get it. Okay? This information is not old. This is only a couple decades old, this information. Now the outer hair cells, if you look at this slide here, see the orange in the middle here? That's the tectorial membrane laying on top of the hairs of the outer hair cells. See that? So when you go to the next slide, they've had to tear this tectorial membrane off the hairs. You can see the tips of the hairs, and then you can see the indentation where the hairs were jammed into, meaning this slide. Okay, now watch the slide carefully. This is the active cochlear mechanism. This says a lot. Okay, notice when sounds below 50 decibels, soft sounds, activate the cochlea, the outer hair cells are given a message, and we don't know how they are given the message, but they are given the message to shrink. And when they shrink, they pull down this tectorial membrane to bend those hairs. Now, if sounds greater than 50 dB activate the cochlea, then there's sufficient fluid motion inside the cochlea to bend the hairs of the inner hair cells themselves. The motion is sufficient, the fluid motion. But if the sounds activating the cochlea are less than 50, you need the active outer hair cell mechanism to pull that membrane down and bend or shear the hairs of those inner hair cells. And that's the message that gets sent up to the brain. You can see it pulsating in this blue right here where I'm circling. That information is the 8th cranial nerve going to the brain. Okay? And it mostly is in cahoots with the inner hair cells. So the outer hair cells are given a message by this red nerve here, the olivocochlear bundle, you will recall, and they're given the message to shrink. And they can only pull down that membrane if their hairs are embedded into the underside of that tectorial membrane. The sole action of that, or the main action of this stuff, this creates what's called the active cochlear mechanism. It changes a passive traveling wave into an active traveling wave. The passive wave is the wave discovered by von Beckersey. Low frequency peak would happen here, a mid frequency peak would cause, or frequency would cause a peak here, a high frequency sound would cause a peak here, but the peaks by gum would be round. And that roundedness means lots of hair cells stimulated. Lots at the same time. Watch my cursor. All the way from here to here. A whole bandwidth of hair cells would be stimulated. Okay? Think of this as 20 cycles per second, and this is 20,000 cycles per second. Or even in terms of the audiogram, think of this as 125, and think of this as 8,000. Okay? Look at this broad traveling wave peak. It's stimulating a whole bunch of frequencies at the same time. That's why this guy has poorer frequency resolution, poorer delta F. He needs bigger changes in frequencies for him to recognize a change in frequencies. Get it? He needs a bigger change in intensity to recognize a change in intensity. So an active traveling wave is the result of this action. This action's doing two things. It's amplifying the wave, as you can see, and it's sharpening the wave. So now this person can distinguish between frequencies close together. Get it? Good. That's that sharpening peak that I keep showing you. Okay? It's the sharpening peak that I kept showing you over here. Okay, same thing. So you've got the upward spread of masking due to the asymmetrical shape of the wave, and then you have the loss of outer hair cells, meaning you're no longer getting that amplification and sharpening taking place. So lots of things go wrong, okay? So basically, if you take a hearing aid, now here's a person with a blue traveling wave on the top. The cochlea is unrolled, 1 inch long, and 2 frequencies close together are played. The guy gets 2 traveling waves close together. He can easily distinguish them. Middle panel, he's lost his outer hair cells. So the waves are more rounded and less sharp. Now you take hearing aids and you put them on this person, and you've restored the size of the traveling wave, but the sharpness is gone. And nothing is going to bring that back. It's like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. You know how the nursery rhyme goes, okay? You can't put it back together again, and that's why hearing aids have a 2-fold role, as you will learn. They need to provide amplification for the hearing loss, gain, in other words, G-A-I-N, gain, that's amplification. But the second thing is they have to increase the signal speech to noise ratio so that the person with this damaged cochlea can separate the speech from the noise. So hearing aids provide amplification or gain, but they also have directional microphones to pick up sounds more from the front. And they have digital noise reduction. These are things that try to make the speech louder than the noise, that increase what's called the signal to noise ratio. And in so doing, then, the person with the damaged hair cells will be better able to separate the speech from background noise, even though he or she has an passive traveling waves. Has passive traveling waves. Normal hearing people with normal outer hair cells have active traveling waves. And these active traveling waves, of course, can occur anywhere along the basilar membrane. Good, good, good. Otoacoustic emissions are a byproduct of the outer hair cells sharpening the traveling wave. The byproduct of this action. Nothing comes for free, okay? All work creates sweat. Lots of light creates heat, okay? So you don't get anything for free. So the very fact that the cochlear hair cells are amplifying and sharpening the traveling waves means that they are producing what's called otoacoustic emissions. In all essence, the ear working in reverse. Watch what happens. Audiologists at Missouri State in Springfield, Missouri, at Missouri State University learn all about this. I'm an audiologist, and I think HISs should know a little bit about otoacoustic emissions as well. And so here goes. OAEs are measured by a probe stuck in your ear. And they're similar to doing tympanometry, which you will learn more about later. What you're trying to do is to pick up otoacoustic emissions. Never confuse OAEs with tinnitus or ringing in the ear. Different, 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 not the same. What happens with OAEs? Here's your inner hair cells. Here's your outer hair cells. Your outer hair cells are communicating by way of the olivocochlear bundle. Now look carefully at the arrows. The inner hair cells are sending info up the 8th nerve, ipsilateral 8th nerve, and the outer hair cells are receiving sounds from the brain stem going back out to them. Okay, so the cochlea is a two-way street. Now, when they do OAEs, they're putting a probe in your ear canal, and it's got 3 holes. One hole emits a frequency. It's a speaker. The other hole is also a speaker that emits a different frequency. And the third hole is a microphone that picks up an otoacoustic emission. So here goes. The probe in the ear canal, eardrum, malleus, incus, stapes, footplate, oval window, and now what you're seeing is traveling waves in the cochlea. And the traveling waves are going this way until they stop, of course, because they find their place. And then you're having your otoacoustic emission is going out. So here's your frequencies, your 2 different traveling waves, and here's your otoacoustic emission. Interesting. So let's look at what they are. They call them distortion product, OAEs. Pair of pure tones of different frequencies. We call them F1 and F2. Present them simultaneously through the probe and measure the returning distortion product otoacoustic emission, F3, back in the probe. So the probe has 3 holes, like we said. One speaker here, another speaker here. Those 2 tones go in your ear canal, through your middle ear, activate the cochlea, and the outer hair cells produce an intermodulation distortion product that goes back out the middle ear, out the ear canal, and gets picked up by a mic. So now your eardrum is acting like a speaker. It's the ear in reverse. Here's a spectrum of otoacoustic emissions. Here's one frequency. See, this horizontal line here is the noise floor in your ear canal. Very, very soft. Okay? And frequency 1 and frequency 2. You can see that they're different frequencies, and they're put into the ear, and here's the 3rd frequency coming out. And they call this NF, noise floor. Okay, they put one frequency in, another frequency in, and a 3rd frequency, which happens to be 2F1 minus F2. What the Sam Hill does that mean? Here's another picture. F1, F2, here's your otoacoustic emission coming back out of the ear. Here's a person, me, some years ago. My audiogram, and here's the noise floor inside my right ear. Here's the noise floor inside my left ear. They put these pairs of tones, la, 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 and what comes out is otoacoustic emissions in red for the right ear, in blue for the left ear. And you can see they are well above the noise floor. So these pairs of tones are put in. A pair around 1,000 hertz, a pair around 2,000 hertz, a pair around 4,000 hertz, and so on. And notice that at the high frequencies, all of a sudden my OAEs disappear. Well, that's because I've got a little bit of high frequency hearing loss. I have outer hair cell damage there. Okay, so no OAEs there. Weird, huh? Okay, don't worry about the relationship of these tones. That's not, you don't need to know that. It's just OAEs are a byproduct of the outer hair cells working their butts off. Much like when you work hard, you sweat. And what are they? Backward traveling waves that actually go out of, they hit the oval window, they wiggle the ossicles, and now the eardrum's acting like a tiny speaker. And you know why you don't hear OAEs? I'll tell you why you don't hear them. You know how when sound goes into the ear, it hits a big eardrum, and that gets converged onto the small point of your stapes? Pressure is force over an area. Remember that? So sound hits here. Put your hand tight against your face, not much pressure. Push hard against your finger, buku pressure, okay? Because pressure is force over an area. So if sounds are going into the middle ear, you're building up that pressure so that airborne sound can activate a fluid-filled cochlea, right? That's the purpose of your middle ear. But when you're going out, Well, now you're losing sound. The pressure is being dispersed over a larger area. Thank God, otherwise you'd be hearing otoacoustic emissions. Weird, weird. Okay, so here you go. Anyway, this is all OAEs. Anyway, now here's something else to consider, something one should always realize about hearing aids. What you're going to find in this field as you continue your studies on further into second year, you're going to notice a word that pops up a lot in hearing aids, and it's called compression. Now, why do we use that word compression? We use it because of what we call loudness growth. Look at this graph carefully. Here's decibels from 0 to 100, soft to loud. And here on the vertical axis is what we call your perceptions, psychoacoustics, your perceptions of those intensities. So look at the red horizontal, the red diagonal line. Normal loudness growth, like from a seed to an old tree, okay, from a baby into an adult. The growth, okay, watch this. 0 to 20 decibels is heard soft. 50 to 60 decibels, comfortable. 90 to 100 is heard as too loud. Now look at the light blue line. That's what happens with outer hair cell damage. And outers die before inners. Always realize that. Very important. Outers die before inners. So this kind of stuff happening here, outer hair cells, because they move, because they are the moving part in any system dies first. So the moving part is going to go first. And what do the outer hair cells do? They help you hear soft sounds, right? They help you hear sounds below 50. Because as I said earlier, if the sounds activating the cochlea are bigger than 50, there's enough fluid motion in the cochlea to move the hairs of the inner hair cells by themselves. So if you removed the outer hair cells, you'd have about a 50 decibel hearing loss, which, by the way, is what most people have. Mr. Jones, Herb, as we said in 110 this morning, or Mrs. McGillicuddy, as we said in 110 this morning, okay, they have outer hair cell damage. That's presbycusis. Presbyterian, Church of the Elders, presbyopia, your arms aren't long enough to see the page, you need reading glasses like me, okay, or presbycusis, inability to hear treble. The trouble hearing treble, outer hair cell death near the base of the cochlea. Moderate degree of hearing loss, resulting in dull, rounded, traveling waves. No longer the sharpening, no longer the amplification done by the outer hair cells. So because of that, what happens to these people is they've got a rapid growth of loudness. Look at the light blue line. Now they can't hear until 50 or 60. So now 50 or 60 sounds very soft, and yet 100 sounds too loud. It's like their floor and ceiling came together. But notice I didn't put my hands together like this. I kept my ceiling the same. The floor went up. They can know their dynamic range, their floor of hearing, their ground level rose. So they can only hear from here to here instead of from here to here. So look at the picture again. What happens? They've got a smaller dynamic range. They can't hear until 50 or 60, and yet 100 is too loud. Okay, so what do hearing aids need to do for these people? They need to amplify soft sounds by a lot and loud sounds by little or nothing at all. That's called compression. They call it wide dynamic range compression, and it's meant for mild to moderate sensory neural hearing loss, which is the most common hearing loss in the world. And those hearing aids use compression. They amplify soft sounds by a lot, average sounds by less, and loud sounds by little or nothing at all. That's why hearing aids cost so much. They have to constantly change the amount by which they're amplifying. They're like amplifiers with an automatic volume control on them, constantly. It's a trip. It's all because of the hair cells. This is another way of looking at it, okay? Typical sensory neural loss, dropping down, good hearing in the lows, poorer in the highs. For any of you beginning to freak, don't worry about it. You will learn about audiograms in 130, okay, in audiometry. I'm just giving you an idea here. The O's are the right ear. You can see the decibels going down. You can see the frequencies going up. Okay, 125 isn't on here. I was lazy. But you can see more decibels are required to hear the treble. On the right-hand side are the red and light blue lines. Basically, they're talking about a slightly different kind of decibel that you and I, anyone taking 110, we will be looking at this next week Tuesday, minimal audible field, MAF, minimal audible pressure, MAP. It all ties together. At any rate, look at how this person's floor is elevated and his ceiling is not. That's because these numbers go up as we're going up, okay? Whereas the audiogram, the numbers increase going down anyway, okay? Basically, gets a bit complicated. So here's the most common hearing loss in the world, presbycusis. Now the X's are the left ear, the O's are the right ear, and the frequency is along the top. 125 is like low C on a piano, 250 is like middle C in music, 500 hertz, high C, and then octaves. As you double the frequency, you go up by 1 octave. So there you have it. And here's your decibels going down the side. And you can see that the person's right and left ears are pretty good at the low frequencies. Not many decibels are required to just barely hear the tones. But as the pitch is increased or the frequency is increased, more decibels are required. This means that the person has more and more outer hair cell damage as you get to the higher frequencies. So if you were able to look inside of his cochlea, you would see a lot of outer hair cell death or damage near the base of the cochlea. The high frequency traveling waves would be dull and rounded. This is what you call noise-induced hearing loss. This is the second most common cause of hearing loss in the world. The second most. The first is presbycusis. Okay? Noise-induced hearing loss has a particular shape, a very unique shape. It's like a rat came in and just took a bite out of your hearing. Right there. Just took a bite out of it. You've got perfectly normal hearing for the low to mid pitches and perfectly normal hearing for the very highs. It's just that right here around 4,000 hertz, you've got a moderate degree of hearing loss. Now, why would that be? Well, I'll tell you why. Here's noise-induced loss again, okay? This is my drawing of it. Perfectly normal hearing, and then at 4,000 hertz, a drop, and then a recovery again. Okay, it's because of the outer ear canal resonance that you and I have studied in acoustics class, and that you and I have studied in anatomy and physiology several units ago. I believe unit 2, okay, the outer ear. The resonance of the outer ear canal as a quarter wave resonator. Well, what happens when you flip this resonance upside down? You got your noise-induced loss. And what does it say here? Noise tends to damage hair cells a half an octave higher than the peak of outer ear resonance. So if you shift this resonance up about to the right a half an octave and flip it down, flip it, you're going to get this. Noise-induced hearing loss. So never think of this resonance as a damning thing. It's a gift made by evolution or our creator, whichever you choose, okay? It helps us hear the high frequency consonants of sound. But our ears were never meant to hear noises like we hear. Our ears were meant to hear the soft voices over the crackling of a fire. Our ears were never meant to hear the clanging of steel on steel. Always realize elderly people in non-developed countries have better hearing than elderly people in the USA. And the reason why is because they have less noise pollution. We never look at the sun because we know we'll go blind. But somehow people think that the ear is not going to become deafened by noise. If you can hear someone's headphones and you're not listening to his or her system, you can only imagine the decibels smashing into that person's ear canals. Remember what we said on the midterm for acoustics, okay? What's the cutoff for noise-induced hearing loss? 85 dB SPL for more than 8 hours a day. And every time that increases by a 5, the allowed time exposure gets cut in half. So 90 dB, 4 hours a day. 95, 2 hours a day. 100, 1 hour a day. 105, a half an hour a day. So noise-induced loss. The sickening thing about noise-induced loss is that it is preventable. Here's some hair cell counts from a hunter who had high-frequency hearing loss. Here's noise-induced hearing loss. The solid line is the inner hair cell count, and the 3 dotted lines are the 3 outer hair cell rows counts. And now look at how they're all living until the high frequencies near the base of the cochlea, now they're gone due to noise. Here's a hunter who is right-handed. Now, if you're right-handed, how do you hold a rifle? Which ear is exposed to the gun barrel? The left. So a right-handed rifle shooter is going to have more noise exposure to the left ear, and vice versa. So when you go here, you can see that there's more hair cell damage to this hunter's left ear than there is to his right ear. I'll let you read that. I think it's kind of interesting. Meniere's disease is another pathology of the inner ear. Meniere's disease is caused by too much endolymph in the scala media. Too much endolymph. Here's one drawing of Meniere's. Here's another. Back to this one. The X is excellent hearing in his left ear. The O's a rising hearing loss in his right ear. In other words, the worst hearing in the right ear is at the low frequencies instead of the highs. Very unusual. Most people have trouble hearing treble. Okay? This is a common hearing loss. This is a common hearing loss. But this here is a lot less common. Okay? A rising hearing loss as you move to the right. Now, if you're looking at Meniere's, this orange here basically is the scala media. I just drew it across the audiogram. Call it the basilar membrane. It's the floor upon which your hair cells stand. Now, if I'm able to draw on here, I'm actually going to try and draw this to kind of help make it make more sense, okay? Home, and then I'm going to take a line, and I'm going to say, you got one row of outer hair cells all along here. Okay, and then I'm going to say home, and I'm going to say copy, and I'm going to say home, and I'm going to say paste, and you're going to have 3 rows here. And I'm going to take this one, you know, you're going to have all these different rows of hair cells. I'm going to say copy and paste. Okay, take this guy here, put it here. So you're going to have all these rows of hair cells, right? Let's say home and paste here. I'll get another one. Stick it here, okay? So the top one would be inner hair cells, and then you've got various rows of outer hair cells, right? How many rows of outer hair cells do you recall do you have at the base? I'm hoping you say 3. How many rows of hair cells do you have at the apex of the cochlea? 5. So look at now, the cochlea is wider, and then the apex gets narrower. but the width of the hair cell region goes exactly back asswards. Remember that? So at the base of the cochlea, the wide base, the scala media is narrowest. At the narrow apex, the scala media is the widest. So all I did here was make a schematic, and I drew the scala media in orange, and I laid it across the top of the audiogram. Now, what's Meniere's? Endolymphatic hydrops, meaning too much fluid, too much endolymph in the scala media. Like, okay, so the whole scala media is bulging, and the Reissner's membrane is bulging, and the basilar membrane is bulging. Those who indulge bulge, I'll tell you. So what happens there? Well, what's happening? At the apex, it's wider, it has more mass, and it's less stiff. At the base of the cochlea, the basilar membrane is narrower, less mass, and it's more stiff. The walls are more stiff. So, if you start pumping excess fluid into the scala media, where do you think the walls are going to bulge? They're going to bulge where the walls are less stiff. And they're going to bulge mostly at the apex of the cochlea. And so it's going to manifest itself as a low-frequency sensory neural loss. And the thing about Meniere's disease, it's a real sicko disease. I mean, it's brutal. It comes in episodes, almost like a seizure. The person feels an aura, can tell it's coming, and gets three things happening at the same time. Rotary vertigo, so he's puking his guts out. Roaring tinnitus in the ear, and a drooping hearing loss like that in the lobes. And it'll last for several hours, and then it'll go away. After a couple of weeks, he's going to get another bout of it, and it'll go away. And after another couple of weeks, he gets another bout of it. It's episodic. Meniere's disease is a total holy drag. And each time you get it, and as it leaves you with more and more low-frequency loss. And then later on, the loss gets to be more flat. Very strange disease. Tinnitus is something we will cover in 125 hearing disorders. Tinnitus is a very common complaint of clients. And you can have ringing in the ears, tinnitus, T-I-N-N-I-T-U-S. Some people say tinnitus. I stay away from that because an itis is an infection. Tinnitus, ringing in the ears. The most common hearing loss it's associated with is noise-induced loss, which has a high-pitched ringing tinnitus, and the roaring tinnitus associated with Meniere's disease. A lot of people try all kinds of snake oil medications to stop the ringing. Guess what? They don't work. Okay? No matter what you buy, when you see ads like that, it's a load of crap. We'll talk about tinnitus and the way tinnitus is treated and how it can be. That's also going to be covered more in your counseling course as well, because tinnitus is something really to be reckoned with. Basically, the treatment for tinnitus is actually hearing aids. Hearing aids pick up background noise, and so that background noise masks the ringing in the ear. Okay? The person hears the tinnitus most at night when she's trying to sleep. Background noise like a fan or an air conditioner goes a long way to getting reducing the tinnitus. Also getting the person to focus less on it, to think of it mainly as a nuisance instead of something dangerous. So we'll be covering tinnitus at a not really that much in this particular course. A cochlear implant, very interesting too, done for total cochlear pathology. Lots can be. I think, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to focus next week mostly on disorders. That's what we're going to do. We're going to focus on hearing disorders. What the heck? Why not? I'm going to talk about tinnitus a bit next week because we're ahead in anatomy class. We're way ahead. So I think what we'll do is I'll focus on, I'm going to talk about cochlear implants next week. I'm going to talk more about presbycusis, noise-induced loss, Meniere's disease, stuff like that. So let's kind of go back up to here, look at our notes, and make sure we summarize right here. Traveling wave, how does that go? Because I got another 2 minutes and we're done here. So asymmetrical traveling wave, shearing action, we've covered that. Traveling wave and the twofold role of outer hair cells, put a star by that. Make sure you read these notes. Make sure you look at these notes and tie it together with this Zoom session. Then we talked about otoacoustic emissions a little bit today. They are non-behavioral, meaning non-voluntary. They're very useful for testing hearing in infants and in people who cannot respond voluntarily. True enough, you know, okay? We talked about wide dynamic range compression, okay? Trying to imitate the role of outer hair cells. And then we'll launch into, so I'm going to kind of start right around here next week, and then just kind of carry on toward the end of this particular unit. It's a good unit, it's a big unit, and now we will say that it took us 4 weeks to cover this unit. And you know what? I've got no trouble with that at all. We are ahead in anatomy class, so we can afford to do this. Plus, if I do some here, there's less that I need to cram into 125 disorders next in the summer. So, that having been said, I will stop sharing. Now you get to look at my ugly face, and now I will stop recording so you don't have to hear that voice of mine anymore. Anyway, cheers to you, live long and prosper. I will stop recording.